Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji tradition video. This video is going to discuss the Kusunoki teaching known as the Five Divine Powers, and from that teaching we are on the power of reality, or the power of truth, depending on how you want to translate it. You can translate it as reality or truth. In the previous video, we discussed the teaching of the five divine powers, powers of the Tao. And Tao in that case meant the power of good government. So as I said, this video is going to address the power of truth. Previous video did power of the Tao, good government, and this is doing the power of truth or the power of reality. And this is related to the freedom and the liberation that comes from a mind that has gone beyond hope and fear and beyond doubt and hesitation. It is broken into three main segments, each focusing on a different aspect. So just like in the Power of the Tao video, we are instructed by the text to chant particular mantra of cleansing before we discuss and contemplate the teaching. And so as such, we will begin with the cleansing mantra, and at the end of the video, there is also a mantra for multiplying the merit and the benefit, a dedication of the multiplied merit. While some viewers may disapprove or dislike this aspect, it is part of the teaching, and it would be grossly inappropriate to discuss the teaching without doing the mantras. So, again, at the beginning of the teaching, this slide, they will do the cleansing and the cleansing mantra and the direction of the intent. And then at the end of the teaching, in a later slide, we will do the multiplication of merit and the dedication. Om Shri Shri Maka Shri Shushri Swaka Om Shri Shri Maka Shri Shushri Swaka Om Shri Shri Maka Shri Shushri Swaka. So this video, the power of reality or the power of truth, we'll just say the power of truth, is broken into three main sections. The first section is the clear mirror of the true emptiness, which we could also call the pristine mirror of the true emptiness. Another possible interpretation is the pristine mirror of the truth, emptiness. But we're gonna go with the pristine mirror of true emptiness. This is a short teaching about the nature of mind. And then the next section, the second one, is called Revealing the Profound and Subduing Demonic Activities. And this takes a look at distinguishing things that are true, real, profound events, and those things that are fraudulent or fake events. And the third section is called Obtaining a Peaceful Mind by Ending Doubt and Hesitation. And that's a short teaching about the nature of phenomenon. So it starts with a brief teaching on the nature of mind, a teaching on distinguishing true and fake, and then a teaching on the nature of phenomenon. Now, the viewers need to know that this entire teaching of truth, or the power of truth, is fundamentally rooted in esoteric Buddhist thought. So we will be going into that quite a bit in this video. So as just stated, Kusunoki is heavily rooted and based in esoteric Buddhism. Kusunoki Masashige himself was a Shingon Buddhist, and his descendants were Buddhist as well. Some more than others, but in the main, the family has a history of being Buddhist. During the 1600s, students of the Kusunoki, that would be non-Kusunoki family members, but they were studying the Kusunoki tradition. They debated the level of Buddhism that Kusunoki was meant to embody. Some traditions concluded that Kusunoki main point, the main root focus of Kusunoki is Buddhism. But some students concluded that Buddhism is just an aspect of the system. It's not really the root or the core. It's a skill of the system, or it's a technique of the system. Now, my personal opinion, having read through the Kusunoki Kaden, through the Kusunoki family teachings, I think that this debate is more reflective of the agendas of the students of the time. Because in my opinion, reading the text is fundamentally a Buddhism as the root. So again, historically, there's a debate in the 1600s, there's a debate among Kusunoki students about, is Buddhism the root or is Buddhism just a means? However, my personal opinion, is that the text is very clear. Buddhism is the root. So let's get on to the first teaching, the pristine mirror of true emptiness. And the text starts with, everything found within the space between heaven and earth is made clear by this principle, which is a poetic way of saying this is a fundamental root principle. And the principle is the clarity aspect. And that true emptiness, because we're not just talking about emptiness. So you have emptiness, which could be understood as the absence of an inherent reality. But this is the true emptiness, which is the union of the clarity or the luminosity with emptiness to create true emptiness. Emptiness without clarity is a one-sided emptiness. Dare say, an incomplete or imperfect notion of emptiness. So this is what is meaning by true emptiness. Emptiness and luminosity, or emptiness and clarity. And what this is referring to ultimately is the mind itself. Not the mundane, dualistic, caught up in hopes and fears and emotions mind, but the Buddha nature, the mind itself, the nature of the mind, is a clarity and an emptiness. Also, the text then talks about that this clarity also refers to the fact that cause and effect cannot be hidden. So then clarity refers to the inability to hide negative actions or the inability to hide positive actions. And so these two aspects, one, the nature of mind is clarity and emptiness, or this true emptiness. But furthermore, in terms of activity or application, or a very relative application, is that the mind's clear, luminous emptiness captures all phenomenon. So let's just take a moment to say that this is a very simplified, in the text you got to understand, in the actual Kusunoki Kaden, the teachings are rather short. They're not meant to be all inclusive. They are introductions of critical points. So then the student is given the introduction to the critical point, but then they may spend a lifetime comprehending that critical point. That having been said, it's a very simplified presentation of a higher view of esoteric Buddhism. So esoteric schools such as Tibet, schools from Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal, northern India, developed these teachings, even further than Shingon. On paper, that is. That isn't to say that Shingon students cannot or do not reach these levels of studies through their own practice and efforts. And also, as we'll see in another slide, this Kusunoki Kaden is rooted heavily on a particular sutra, which is considered an extremely advanced Mahayana sutra, almost to the point of, in many times, it's categorized as an esoteric sutra. We'll get to that later. So, but the viewer should understand that this entire power of the truth section of the teaching is rooted on what is essentially esoteric Buddhism. The second aspect, and then as we mentioned earlier, the second aspect of the clarity is in the application aspect, is the fact that nothing escapes the clarity of mind. The mind is the sovereign ruler of the mind stream, so to speak. When you create negative karma, you cannot hide the creation of negative karma. You cannot hide from the ripening, because it's not some foreign agency watching you and tracking you. It's your own mind tracking you. You're both the offender and the lawman, so to speak. So it means that your own mind is the source of the results, or your own mind is the source of those future experiences. So again, it's a brief introduction to a very profound point that the student would then spend their life contemplating. The next point is, the second part is revealing profound events and subduing demonic activities. This section actually contains a story about Masashige when he was younger. And his town is visited by a fortune-telling Yamabushi, and this fortune-telling Yamabushi is going around and with these seemingly psychic powers is telling people to do this and do that, and he knows this about this and he knows that about that. And basically this Yamabushi is starting to take control over the town, right, or the village, because he seemingly has these psychic powers and people are doing what he's saying. Masashige does, but Masashige is not convinced, and he does some investigating, and he finds out that the Yamabushi is in fact a fraud. And the Yamabushi just has a lot of spies in town feeding him intel on the townspeople. So Masashige ends up confronting the Yamabushi and forcing a confession out of the Yamabushi. And then Masashige reports him to the Yoshino headquarters. The Yoshino headquarters send out Yamabushi, and they deal with this rogue Yamabushi. There was also a doctor who is sort of his accomplice, who also gets caught as part of the fraud being revealed as well. So that's the story that's told. But now let's talk about some of the things to be learned from the story. So the scamming Yamabushi's behavior is referred to as evil spirit enchantment. That is, that the behavior of scamming people with a fake supernatural ability or pretending to have fake supernatural powers is equated to being like an evil spirit that is putting an enchantment on people. Fake supernatural powers are just scams. It's evil behavior. You're lying and cheating people. However, real supernatural powers shouldn't surprise you either. All supernatural powers are either fake or they're just upaya, skillful means, sort of a consequential like result of past actions. But you should not be enchanted with any supernatural powers, be they real or fake. So if they're fake, they're called demonic powers because they're fake. And if they're real, then they're profound. But whether, and if it's a fake power, then you subdue it, you expose it. And if it's real, you just accept it as part of life, and you do not become mesmerized by it. Masashige then continues on by giving an example of a true or a profound event in which he was attending a ceremony where Hachiman Daibosatsu was being invited into a new temple shrine. And for the viewers, most of you probably know this already, but let me just clear. During Masashige's time, Buddhism and Shinto were intermixed. So Hachiman temples were also Hachiman shrines. The Buddhism and the Shinto was hand in hand. And so it's not like modern Japan. In modern Japan, Buddhism and Shinto are split and it's a temple or it's a shrine. But during Masashige's time, a Hachiman holy site was both a temple and a shrine. So he was attending a ceremony where they were inviting Hachiman into this temple or into this shrine. And as the ceremony was taking place, a young boy in the crowd suddenly became essentially possessed, began speaking in strange and cryptic voices and sort of waving his arms around and all that kind of creepy being possessed sort of thing. But as the boy spoke and flailed around, as he eventually stumbled into one of the ponds, and as he continued to just say things in this strange voice and flail around in the pond, the water begins to boil and bubble. And eventually the voice stopped and everything returns back to normal. The people pull the boy out of the pond, etc., etc. Now Masashige witnessed this and he accepted it as some kind of phenomenon, some kind of event, but he did not become mesmerized by it. He didn't become attached to it. And he also at this time warns, because remember, he says, if it's a fake event, you just expose it. And if it's something real, okay, it's real, but don't become enchanted by it. Don't become mesmerized by it. And then he also then warns at the end of this section, that even the gods will use people the way that people use tools. So you should not get attached to true events because it may not end well. So there was this implication here that, even in a situation where a real god or a real demon or a real spirit might actually be involved, you should really not get tied into it because, they could just be using you. So in the first section, we were talking about the nature of the mind being this true emptiness, this union of clarity and emptiness. And then in the second section, there is all kinds of phenomenon, whether it's true, a true paranormal phenomenon or whether it's a fake fraudulent scam. either way, you don't pay any attention to. You just let it go, right? If it's fake, expose it. If it's real, just don't become attached to it. And that's and because the extension is that you're you're not trying to operate off of the relative mind. You're not trying to operate off of a mind that gets attached or confused or bewildered by events around it. You're trying to operate off the mind discussed in the first section, the true emptiness mind, the calm, serene mind that doesn't get attached. So therefore, if it's fake, just expose it. If it's real, just move on. Right? And so this is where these lessons are building on each other. They're giving you a proper view to have, and it is explaining the liberating power that comes from operating from the truth. So then that moves on into the next section, which is called putting an end to doubt and confusion and having a peaceful mind. It starts with this sentence. Even though I explain and advocate for an immeasurable amount of profound and wondrous things, from ancient times to the present, none of these things are self-existing in an outer world at all. Now I know that on the actual screen there's a typo. It says one of these things are self-existing, but that's a typo. The correct is none. None of these things are self-existing in an outer world at all. This is also very advanced Buddhist teaching as well. So again, Masashige confirms that he believes and teaches about all kinds of wondrous and profound things. But everything that he is explaining has no existence outside of being something experienced by one's own mind. And we're not talking about, a hallucination, like a drug-induced sort of hallucination. What he's saying is, and this is getting into esoteric Buddhist belief, ideology, and teaching, is that there is not an outer world that contains anything that isn't a projection of your own karma. Furthermore, when he proceeds to explain that in a less profound understanding, so then he goes on, he starts with that and then he sort of goes to a more applicable thing. He talks about most of the stories of old demons and such are almost always just human beings that have become known or understood as demons over time. Basically, he's saying, and then he says, basically, if it has a human form or if it has a human shape, human aspect, it's a human being, right? So what he's done is he starts with a very profound esoteric aspect, and then he backtracks to a very mundane, applicable lesson where he says, most of the demons of the past are just humans that have been misunderstood or remembered as demons. And this also crisscrosses with the Tada Genji tradition, because the Tada Genji tradition, for example, teaches that most of the great demons of Japan's past were actually human beings that have just been sort of mythologized into demons, such as Shutendoji. Shutendoji wasn't really a demon. He was a cannibalistic leader of a group of thieves who, but he wasn't actually a demon. He's sort of remembered as a demon, mythologized as a demon, but he was a human, a cannibal. He was a cannibal, but he was a human being. And so over time, these people become demonified. All right. So anyway, so then that leads us to the next step of this third section. And that next section is in terms of relative applicability. The appearance of demons and ghosts is usually the result of one's own disturbed karma. That is, if your mind is clear and you are a moral person, you will probably never see demons or ghosts, real demons and ghosts. While demons and ghosts exist, right? Buddhism teaches about it. Masashi, the Kusunoki Ryu, teaches about demons and ghosts in other places. The average person should never actually see a real demon or a real ghost, right? Now in red, this part isn't contained in the teaching, but this is a generic sort of Buddhist explanation in red. And that is the reason most people see a ghost. The reason for seeing a ghost is generally explained as you have advanced spiritual practice, and most people do not have this. So advanced yogis, people that dedicate themselves to yoga, Buddhist yoga practices, they are able to like see ghosts and spirits and stuff because of spiritual advancement, spiritual refinement. Most people don't have that. Most people see ghosts and demons because they have bad karma, and that bad karma sort of matches the karma of the ghost. Or they're really sick, or they have really low chi. So the average healthy human being should really never actually see a ghost. If you're seeing ghosts and demons and you're not an advanced, Buddhist yogic practitioner, you need to actually be very careful, because you got to go, okay, really the only reason a non-practitioner sees ghosts is usually for a bad reason. Like I said, karma that matches the ghost, that's not good. Or being really sick or having really disrupted chi, that's also not good. So after Masashige opens with a esoteric opening, then he backpedals it to a more relative thing, then he dives back into a more esoteric aspect where he goes on then, and he again it says there's no external independently existing phenomena. Pure lands, hells, these two are just displays of the mind stream. There is no self-characterized external container world, nor any self-characterized internal living beings. Nothing is self-characterized or independently existing. Whatever you're seeing and experiencing is a formation born from your own karma and your own mind stream. Masashige then goes on to quote a particular Buddhist sutra. It's called the Surangama Sutra. It's also known as the sutra that contains the white umbrella mantra, or the white umbrella dharani. And white umbrella is not just a random name, it's actually the name of a deity. It's a female form of Avalokiteshvara. And anyway, this sutra, the Surangama Sutra, is a very advanced esoteric Mahayana sutra. It's essentially, it's not a tantra, but it is really close. It's probably one of the most esoteric Mahayana sutras that you can have until you get into things being a tantra. So, and if you don't know the difference between sutra and tantra, that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. But basically, it is the Surangama is a very advanced, very esoteric Buddhist sutra, and so that is the sutra that is quoted in this Power of the Truth teaching, and many lines are pulled from it, etc., etc. So one of the lines is, "It is through delusions that sentient beings experience various and different births. However, a person has no inherent existence." So, real quick, for those who have some interest in the Surangama Sutra, it uses Yogacara language, and so essentially, if you're I don't if the viewer has a knowledge of esoteric Buddhism, it's Mahayana, it's super advanced, it's esoteric, it uses Yogacara language, and it reads very, very similar to basically the inner tantra text in terms of its discussion of the nature, phenomenon, and mind, etc., etc., etc. Like I said, it is technically a sutra, but it reads as if it was a tantra. And it even has the white umbrella dharani in it, like it was a tantra. It's a very esoteric sutra. But that ultimately is the culmination of these 3 points. So these 3 points are introduced to the Kusunoki student, and the great culmination is essentially it's essentially the teachings and the view of the Surangama Sutra. So now that you know what those 3 teachings are and you know where it's rooted into, we can get into the applicability of this third part, and that is that the text itself directly says, "One must reach this conclusion and do away with doubt and hesitation. If there is even a little bit of doubt or hesitation, then it is hard to say that you can become a great general or a high-level leader." Right? Doubts and hesitations allow enemy plots to unfold upon you. By doing away with confusion and doubt and hesitation, you can truly follow the natural way of things, and you can reverse enemy plots and turn the plots on to the enemy. By doing away with doubt and hesitation, you will achieve a peaceful mind. So this whole thing is almost a quote. I only put the first part in quotes, but the rest of basically everything on the page is basically should the whole page should basically be in quotations. But I didn't because I skipped a, I sort of summarized a little bit, but for the most part, this is almost pulled directly from the text. And this is the point of application. So the purpose of the power of truth, on one hand, it has a spiritual application for your own spiritual well-being, et cetera, for the welfare of you and the welfare of others. But in terms of the military application, in terms of the warrior application, if you put these three principles into effect, then you will have no doubt, you will have no hesitation, you will see things clearly, you will perceive things clearly. People will not be able to trick you or plot against you because you will have this wisdom. So that's ultimately the end of it. I know there was a lot of stuff in there, and for some of you guys that were hoping for distinct military techniques, sorry. This particular teaching is, again, it's the power of truth, so it dives deep into the esoteric Buddhist ideas. Again, the text itself doesn't it's not super long, it's not super detailed. It hits on these key points, and it says, like, this sutra teaches this is what we're doing from this sutra, this is it's a real, like, almost bullet point sort of introduction to these concepts. The idea would be that the student would be introduced to these concepts and then spend their life developing their understanding and experience of these concepts. So now that we're finished with it, it is time for that mantra that multiplies merit, and then we multiply the merit, and then we dedicate that merit to the welfare of all sentient beings. Like, may all sentient beings be set free of delusions. That's the mindset to have. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimanaskara Sohaka. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimanaskara Sohaka. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimanaskara Sohaka. All right, so now after that, we can summarize the power of the truth. Power of the truth. So the first power was power of the Tao, which is power of good government. Power of truth is the power that comes from clearing away confusion, doubt, and hesitation, from being able to clearly distinguish true and good and real from false, bad, and demonic. The power that comes from letting go of the addiction to concepts and allowing the mind to peacefully remain clear and unbound by concepts. The power that comes from not falling into schemes, not falling into scams, not falling into lies, both mundane and profound.